My name is Adriana Fontaine, and I work for the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. I am also the manager for our early childhood support programs. We have two: Family Connections for families enrolled in birth to 3, and Preschool Pathfinder for families who have little ones with developmental delays entering pre-K special education. And tonight's presentation will be all about evaluations in birth to 3, key elements of a multidisciplinary evaluation and how you can prepare for it. And with us is Ashley and Karen. Karen is a physical therapist from Reach Out, and Ashley is a developmental therapist. And thank you so much, ladies, for joining.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
So guess we'll get started. I'm going to just add my screen on here so we can look at the presentation. See if I can get fancy enough to do so. Bear with me for 1 second.
Welcome everyone who's joining. Feel free to chat with us, provide any comments that you have.
Okay. Do you want me to get started, Vanessa, or do you want to wait for a few more people to join?
What time is it right now? It's 6. I think we can give it 2 more minutes.
Okay.
In the meantime, if you want to introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about what you do in birth to 3.
Absolutely. So my name's Karen. I am a physical therapist in birth to 3. And what that basically means is that I work with little ones on learning how to move. And we work with that birth to 3 population. And we work with them on all kinds of objectives. Even though I'm a physical therapist, I work with families and children on reaching other types of goals like language goals and learning how to use their hands or get along with others, and supporting families and helping their children to do so. Go ahead, Ashley.
Sure. I'm Ashley. I'm a developmental therapist with Reach Out. That is birth to 3's term for early childhood special education teachers. I often tell families my education is broad with pockets of deep. So like Karen, I work on specific goals with families. So we might work on communication, movement, play skills. And then as a developmental therapist, if I need more specific support from a physical therapist or a speech therapist or an occupational therapist, our agency would have that available to us.
And we both work for a program called Reach Out, and we primarily serve the New Haven area, but throughout the state of Connecticut, there are at least there's 19, I believe, programs that service all different areas in the state. So depending on where you live, what town you live in, will depend on what agency is able to provide services in your town. Okay. So the objectives of our evening tonight, we're really trying to just help parents and caregivers and whoever is interested in accessing the birth to 3 system, kind of what that evaluation process typically looks like and how you can participate in that. So our objectives are, to explore those key elements of the developmental evaluation that we complete with families and caregivers. Let you guys know, how can I prepare for this evaluation? Sometimes parents can be, pretty nervous about having someone come, into their home or have a lot of concerns about, what their child is doing and how they're developing. So just so you have a little bit of information on how to get ready for that evaluation. And sometimes it's nerve-wracking to be able to communicate your child's needs to strangers basically that are, coming into your home. So we want to help give you some ideas around that and how to engage with the evaluation team when they come to your home. And another big thing that we find, test scores can, sometimes be a little daunting to understand. So we'd like to be able to shed a little bit of light on that as well. And then finally let you know what some next steps would be if your child's eligible or if your child isn't eligible for our program.
So where do we start? We were talking before everyone joined about this. We feel like it's sometimes very confusing for parents. Anyone can make a referral to Birth to 3. Parent, caregiver, doctor, daycare provider, anyone can make that referral. The parent has to agree to it, but a parent does not have to wait until their doctor makes the referral. You can make the referral by phone, you can call 211, or you can call the info line, or you can call the early childhood number specifically. The intake person will gather some information from you about your concerns, and then they will assign a program to complete the evaluation. This is where you'll want to be a little bit more specific. They'll want to make sure that based on your concerns, they have the right therapist come out for the evaluation. So if you have concerns about motor development, they're going to want to send an occupational therapist or a physical therapist out. If you have concerns about communication, they're going to want to make sure a speech therapist is on that evaluation team. There are 19 Birth to 3 agencies in Connecticut. Each town has at least 2 programs to choose from. You can request a specific agency in your area if you have a preference. Otherwise, it's kind of a round robin assignment. So whoever comes up next in the queue. There's more information on the Birth to 3 website about referrals and about the programs if anyone is interested in going on there and looking more in depth. It's the website is birth23.org, and that will take you directly to the Connecticut Birth to 3 website.
Yeah, and some parents like to go on there because there is kind of there's information about each program there on the website. Each program has a description. They have like ratings, like kind of like how they've performed in the past. So you're able to kind of make a decision if you wanted to make a decision on who you wanted to come out to your home to complete the evaluation and provide services. I also neglected to put this on this slide, but an additional way that you can make a referral is on that website. There is the availability to click on make a referral, and then someone would call you back. What is a multidisciplinary developmental evaluation? It's kind of a mouthful, right? So multidisciplinary just simply means that there will be 2 professionals coming to your home to complete the evaluation. And the reason for that is so that we're able to get a really good look at the whole child. You might call and have concerns about, speech, but maybe when you come out, when the evaluators come out, they, do see you're concerned about speech, but then they pick up something else in another area of development. So that's really why we just try to get kind of 2 pairs of eyes so that we get a whole look at the child when we're coming out for an evaluation. There's many combinations of professionals that could come out to perform the evaluation. And as Ashley said, that information that you give when you make a referral about your concerns for your child is important because that will determine kind of who comes out for that evaluation. But the 2 people, could be physical therapists, could be an occupational therapist, special education teachers, speech therapists, social workers sometimes come out as well if there's some, any kind of behavior concerns or things that, you need help with helping your child learn how to cope or work with other children. That can be their specialty area as well. And basically, as I said before, one member of that team will be kind of the primary, will cover that primary concern that you have when you call. But the other will kind of be there to help supplement the rest, other areas of development.
What should you expect and how should you prepare? I think this is something that that is on the minds of a lot of parents when they make that referral. The evaluation is quick. It typically takes about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. It often depends on how much information the parent wants to share. As Karen said, it's very easy. Two professionals come to your home or the child care setting. So we want to make sure that we're meeting you where you're at. So if it is more convenient for a family to have us come to the daycare setting, as long as the daycare is okay with that and they have an area for us to do the evaluation, that's absolutely fine. It's fun. Everything we do looks like play, but there's very specific meaning behind it. We use standardized testing. You're going to learn a lot about your child's development and how to help your child succeed, whether or not he or she qualifies for services. We're going to leave you with information about how you can best support your child. And it's effective. It's an accurate measurement of your child's development. As we said, we use standardized testing. We will be scoring it right there, and you will have information before we leave.
So what should I expect and how should I prepare? We get this question a lot, like, well, what can I have out? What should I, have available? And really we, tell most families, like, really no need to prepare any special toys. You don't need to run out to the store and get like, a special puzzle or shape sorter or something like that. We will bring our toys that are actually part of a testing kit. And because the measure is standardized, it has to be certain types of, a block that's a certain size because it's supposed to be the same across the board. And we always kind of stress that we sanitize those toys. We have a whole protocol on how we make sure that they're clean, because inevitably they will go in your child's mouth more than likely, and we want to make sure that we keep them safe and healthy. And it's okay to have some of your toys out. Like, you don't need to run around and like clean everything up, because it's nice for us to observe how your child interacts with their things that they typically see. But having too much out can also be, can be distracting. So if you know that, your son is super excited about this new toy that grandma brought over, you might want to put that one away just so that it's not too much of a distraction for the child. We want to see children in their natural environment. So, we want to see them interacting with their siblings. It's okay. You don't need to go put the older or younger sibling in another room. You don't need to have a babysitter come over to make sure that that child is, engaged and not interrupting. We are very used to siblings. The thing that some parents I find get a little anxious about that. Like, so if you feel like you're the kind of parent that's going to be constantly like, oh no, I'm so worried that, I can't focus on what's happening, then, having a second parent or someone, around to kind of, redirect a sibling can be helpful for you from a parenting perspective. But even if we're in the middle of the evaluation and your child gets hungry or wants a snack or it's lunchtime, it's okay. We want to see your child engaging in those activities, because that's their natural routine. That's their natural environment. And we get to learn a lot about a child when we see those things happen. We are, as evaluators, we're respectful of your home rules, your customs, the things, that when you have guests enter your home that you ask them to do. So if you ask, guests to remove their shoes, I pretty much remove my shoes almost every time I enter a parent's house.
I think most of us do. Yep.
Yeah. But, if that's a rule in your house, then, definitely let us know so that we, can accommodate to how you feel comfortable in your home. And then, just a COVID note, everything's different these days with COVID, but, some evaluations, depending on the program, depending on, different situations, have been taking place virtually. I think more and more as people start getting vaccinated, we're starting to do those evaluations more in person, but they have been taking place virtually at times. And each program kind of has a specific safe deep protocol in place, depending on, if we're coming into your home, if we're not coming into your home. But, if you have concerns about, the safety around, people entering your home, that is a great question to ask, how we handle things when you're scheduling the evaluation. What should I expect? We are all, when we enter homes, we're all wearing masks, we're all, washing hands or using hand sanitizer, and trying to be as spaced out as we possibly can when we're working with families and children.
Karen, if I may, there are a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to go through them now, or do you want to answer them at the end?
I can't see them, so if they're related to what we're talking about and you want to touch on them now, that's fine.
All right. So Ruby asks, is a multidisciplinary developmental evaluation free?
Yes. Very good question. It is completely free, and it is something that it is part of the birth to three, like under the birth to three umbrella, as one of your rights, to have access to an evaluation of your child at no cost to you.
The second one from Facebook is, how do parents request, and can they request, a different therapist?
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's always best if you can have an honest, open conversation with your therapist and let them know how you're feeling. If you don't feel that that is something that you can do, you can reach out to the agency's director. I would really encourage you to have that conversation with your therapist, though. There's not a problem at all with changing therapists, and there's no reason to think that we don't all mesh together. So just because if you feel like you would be more comfortable with someone else, please reach out to your therapist and just let them know. They will be happy to make that change for you.
Yeah, and like Ashley said, even if that's not a comfortable conversation, you're able to go to the director as kind of like the next chain of command. And we'll talk about this a little bit further later on in the presentation, but one of your rights in birth to three is to, have kind of what's called dispute resolution, right? So if you, if you're not happy with something going on, there's a process, and that's part of your rights in birth to three. There's a lot of information about it on that birth to three website, which we'll reference later as well. But it kind of will tell you what your rights are and how you can go about that process. But definitely starting either with the therapist or the director would be your best first step.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I have one more. What would happen to the care team we have when we move to a different area? So this is for families who are moving.
Yes. So if the family is moving within the state, oftentimes our role as a service coordinator, as the person who's working with the family, would be to help that transition happen. So basically transfer a child's information from one program to the next. You can look at or even ask your service coordinator who you're working with what programs provide services in the town that you would be moving to. And they would be able to, tell you, okay, there's these programs, program A, B, and C. Let's look at them together and figure out maybe what would be the best program for you to transfer to. So definitely rely on your service coordinator to help you with that process and ask them those questions. If you're moving out of state, it's a little bit different because we can't make a direct transfer. But again, your service coordinator that works with you should be able to, help you kind of like research and look at what that looks like in another state so that you know the proper numbers to call to refer your child in that new state.
Thank you so much. And I think that's all I have for now.
Okay. So let's see.
Ways to communicate my child's strengths and needs. If this is feeling like an overwhelming process to you, do not worry. The evaluators will ask you all kinds of specific questions to target this information. However, Some parents really like to write down a list of questions, a list of concerns. If your primary concern is communication, sometimes parents will start a word list so that they can share that with the evaluators. It sometimes feels like you're on the spot when, if somebody says, how many words do you feel like your child is using? And it tends to be more than what you can think of in the moment. So a word list is often helpful. You can record a video of a specific behavior that you're noticing. Oftentimes we'll get, you didn't see what happens when brother comes in the room and he's playing with something. So if there's something very specific like that, feel free to take a video. The more information we have as evaluators, the better we can support you and help you and help develop a plan for you if your child does qualify for services.
Really. And then ways to engage in the evaluation. We like to, refer to you. You're a partner in this process from like day one. So the evaluation is day one, obviously, and we want you as the parents to be, our partners, because you know your child the best. We can come in and do a 2-hour, 1.5-hour evaluation and be in your home for that amount of time. But, we recognize that that's a very, very small snapshot window of your child's life that we're capturing. And you guys, as the parents, are the ones that are really seeing the day-to-day and are definitely the experts. So don't feel like, you are not a part of this. You are, by all means, probably the most important person in the room. Your job, is to just kind of be there with us. Sitting on the floor oftentimes helps children feel more comfortable, because we always joke in birth to 3 that we never sit in furniture. We usually walk into a room and just sit down on the floor, because that's where kids kind of live. They kind of play there and live there. So, being there on the floor with us may help your child feel more comfortable and also help you engage in the process. Definitely ask questions. I mean, we can come in and have all kinds of ideas and things like that, but if we don't know where you're coming from, it's really helpful to know, what you might have questions about. Definitely share your expert knowledge of your child. Let us know everything that, that they can do really well, and then things that, you notice that they struggle with. And then, don't be surprised or alarmed if a therapist or the evaluator asks you to try something like, oh, hey, could you do that with your child? Because, they're going to do it, again, probably a lot better for you than they would for us, because we're strangers to them. So, and sometimes part of our job as we move forward in the birth to 3 process is to show you how to do things with your child anyway. So we're going to be doing a lot of that, like asking you to, give that a try, see how that feels to you, that kind of thing. So sometimes we start as early as the evaluation process, asking families to, just give something a try.
Testing measures. So we use a variety of testing measures. One of the measures we use is called the Battelle Developmental Inventory. This is a tool that looks at all areas of a development, motor skills, so both gross and fine motor. So how the big body movements, climbing, running, jumping, as well as the small motor movements. So picking up little things with your fingers. Cognitive development. Communication, how's my child talking and what are they understanding? Social skills and self-help skills. The MChat is another tool that we use. It is a screening questionnaire for parents to assess a child's risk for autism. It's the modified checklist for autism in toddlers. We offer that for children who are over 16 months old and walking. Parents often encounter this at their pediatrician's office as well. So some families are already familiar with it. We also might use other standardized testing measures if there's a specific area of development that is a concern. So if a parent is especially concerned about communication, the speech therapist that is there might do a very specific test on communication. If it is a very specific concern about motor, the motor therapist might do a very specific test to look a little bit more closely at those concerns. We also use curriculum assessments, so developmental checklists that kind of show you where your child is based on their age, and it's comparing, this one is comparing your child to themselves, so it really looks at their progress over time. And that's something that we start when children are eligible. We start that right, we start that going right in the first few months.
And just a little other note on that, sometimes we will also use those curriculum assessments for children who are we know are going to qualify for birth to 3. So there's a list again on the Birth to 3 website, but there's a list of areas that will automatically qualify a child for birth to 3 services. Then we don't need to use a standardized test assessment. So I think this is on the next slide. Yes, we'll talk about that right now. So when do we get the results? Everybody always wants to know, well, how will I know? When will I know if my child is eligible? And the answer is right away. Like, you don't have to wait. We don't need you to leave and, give you a call later. We score the test right in your home, and we'll review those results before we leave. So that, and give you some ideas of like, okay, this is where they did really well, and this is where we saw some delays. And then we'll give you some ideas on things you can try to help with those things, as you're waiting to get services started. So a little bit about the criteria on how a child becomes eligible for services. A standardized score, and I'm going to get into much more detail about this in a minute, but the criteria that the state of Connecticut follows is a score of -2 standard deviation in at least one area of development, and that's considered a significant delay. So we usually say a significant delay in one area of development, which could just be that you have a significant delay in the movement skills. So your child's not walking when they should be for their age. So, but everything else is kind of following along the right way. And then the second possible way of becoming eligible for birth to 3 would be a moderate delay, or that would have to be 2 areas where a child would demonstrate moderate delays in areas of development. So the standard deviation for that would be -1.5. That's the technical score. And then the third way that a child can be eligible for services would be to, like I was saying before, having that diagnosed condition, which has a high probability of developmental delay. Oftentimes, there is a very long, comprehensive list, again, on the Birth to 3 website that you can access if you look at that. But, a child with hearing loss, for example, automatically qualifies for Birth to 3 services, because there is a high probability that that child will need some supports as they develop for language and for their auditory comprehension.
How do I make sense of the results? And now this is where Karen's going to go in deep.
So I'm sure most of you have seen at one point or another a bell curve. I know it kind of gives me a little bit of anxiety of thinking back to, high school and college years of trying to look at statistics, but really, it can be very simple, and I'm going to try to simplify it for you, so that when you do see these test scores or if the evaluators say to you, oh, well, your child had a -2 standard deviation, what does that mean, right? So the standardized tests that we use, if you can imagine, whoever created these tests, they, gathered all of these, like a really, really large group of children of a certain age. So say a whole gymnasium full of 16-month-olds, for example, and they did the same test for those children, every single one of them, and then they scored it. And then somewhere along the line, they do some really fancy math that I can't really explain to you. But when they do that, it creates this bell curve. So it shows you that the majority of the kids that they tested fall within a certain range, and then some fall a little bit on the outskirts. And then that gives gives us that bell curve. So your child, when they're tested using that same standardized measure, basically gets kind of like plotted on this curve. And it becomes like a reference point. And the point of it is to allow us to compare your child's development to a really, really large group of the same age group of children. So for example, I mean, like I said, I put on the side here that what we're really looking for is that standard deviation. So you'll see down here, there's a couple other measures. There's standard score, percentile rank, but the bottom one is the standard deviation. That's called abbreviated with an SD. So if you pay attention to those numbers down here, remember before we talked about negative 1.5 being a moderate delay. So that would be somewhere right about in here, in this area. And as you can see on the graphic, that's considered below the average range. Anywhere between this -1 standard deviation and the +1 standard deviation, all of these here, any score within that, so it could be a -0.5, that even though it's a negative number, it still is considered average. It's all considered within that average range. What we really want to look for is those numbers like that -1.5, like I mentioned before, in 2 areas of development. Or as you can see here, the -2 standard deviation shows us a significant delay in a certain area. So that would kind of put, that score falls here in the bell curve. So really what we're concerned about is looking at those numbers and recognizing that those numbers are an indicator of eligibility. It's not an indicator of how your child will continue to develop. It just allows us to look at your child compared to many other children of their age. And it allows us to qualify that and, decide whether or not they could use a little bit of help along the way in whatever area of development they're qualifying in. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. I know the standard scores in the bell curve can be really intimidating to look at. And especially like when, you're sitting there, overwhelmed kind of after this whole evaluation process. And then the evaluator starts talking to you about all these numbers, it kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of what those numbers mean and, how to interpret that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that either now or kind of near the end of the presentation.
And if you're going through that process and you have questions about the scores, ask. We're all very happy to explain or, give you examples. Don't ever hesitate to ask for more information.
Another thing that I should mention along that line too is that oftentimes, like as I said before, the evaluation is a snapshot, and we recognize that kids have good days and kids have bad days, and we certainly take into consideration, like if you are sitting there telling us, like, oh well, my son didn't do that for you today, but he does it every other day, because it's a standardized test. We oftentimes have to see a child, actually do something to give them credit for it. But like I said to you before, your input is so important. So, we're going to be making notes of that saying, he didn't do it today during the evaluation, but parent reports that it is something that he would do on a normal basis, so that at least when we have a written report, it may not be reflected in the standardized score, but it will be reflected in, the narrative of the report to say, we didn't see consistency on it today, but, the parent is seeing it on a regular basis.
That's a good point, Karen. Yep.
All right. Okay.
Next steps. So after you have gone through the evaluation process, you have spoken with the therapist about what the scores are, you're going to know, is my child eligible for birth to 3? If they are, the next step is to meet with a therapist and develop an IFSP. That is short for an individualized family service program, and we really focus on the family piece of that. This is a whole family deal. We use a coaching model, so when we think about the family and we think about a natural learning environment, this is all, we're looking at the whole child. We're looking at how the child is within the family. So we use a coaching model to really build parents' competence and confidence in supporting their child's development. Just like an evaluation is a snapshot of your child's ability, we also know that we cannot be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, providing therapy. Parents are an integral, the most important, parents and caregivers, the most important part of any plan that we write. We want to meet you in your natural learning environment because we know that where a child spends most of their time is where they're going to be learning and growing and developing the most. So if your child is in daycare, then, and the daycare provider is willing, we will go to the daycare to provide some support. Just like we do with the parents, we're using a coaching model with the child care providers as well. So, sorry, lost my train of thought. So yeah, so natural learning environment, we can meet you at the daycare, we can meet you in a park, we can go wherever you are during your typical day. What does
And
this
wherever
look like?
wherever you might be having some challenges, you know, like
Yes,
if the grocery
absolutely.
store is a big challenge, we can meet you at the grocery store, things
Yep.
like that.
Yeah, we can meet you at the grocery store. We can meet you at the park. We can go to a pediatrician visit with you. There are lots of things that we can do to support you. What does it look like? Play. It looks like play. So we are going to be sitting down together with families and playing. We are therapists and experts in child development, but parents are the experts on their child. So parents are sharing information with us as far as, you know, strategies that they've already tried, things that they have tried that have worked, things that they've tried that have not worked. And then we will use our child development knowledge to help support that. The hope is that there's carryover. So again, we can be there for an hour or 2 hours a week or however long. But the parents and the caregivers are really the ones that are providing the most support. This is not a homework type of a situation. We're not leaving homework with families. We're really building in strategies throughout the day that your child would typically be excited about. So you know, what are they? So for instance, oh my gosh, they've been loving going to the park. They've been loving going down the slide. Okay, well, how can we build on some of these goals that we've developed together while we're at the playground? It very much looks like play. And again, if you have any questions for the therapist, you know, it doesn't really look like you're providing therapy. It doesn't really look like, it just looks like you're playing. Please feel free to ask, and they will be happy to tell you all about what they're, all about that process. If your child is not eligible, you can re-refer at any time. You can also refer to outside programs. So if a child did not meet that specific definition of a delay with a standardized testing, you can certainly refer to outpatient programs, Yale, CCMC, or Orange Pediatric. There's a variety of places, and the therapist who's your evaluator, the therapist who's doing the evaluation will help you with that. There's also, it's not on here, and I can't remember, Karen, if we put it on the resource page, Ages and Stages. So that is a program with the state where you register, and every couple of months you get a questionnaire in the mail about development that matches your child's age. So you get an 18-month one, then you might get a 20-month one. You fill out the questionnaire, you send it back to them. And if when they look it over, it looks like there's maybe a concern, then they will reach out to you. It's a wonderful program. What if my child qualifies for services, but we're just not ready for that now? That's okay too. Sometimes parents just want a little bit more information about where their child is. They might have a concern. Okay, then that concern might be validated by the evaluation. Yeah, we're noticing the same things you are. But if families are not ready for services, we completely understand. We're here for you when and if you are. Again, you can call us back at any time. It's not a one-shot deal. So if you're just feeling like services aren't right for you right now, let the evaluator know, and they can leave you with some ideas and some strategies to try, to see if that's helpful for you.
Yeah, and I think it's also helpful to just remember that having that information, and that you can re-refer if you're not in that place where you are ready to kind of commit to something. It is within your right. It's not like it's not an obligation. You don't have
Right.
to, participate in birth to 3 services. You're not required to do it. It is, you get to call the shots. You're the one in the driver's seat of this plan. So,
Yep.
and that goes for any time at all. Like if you create an IFSP, and it's going well for you for a little while, but, all of a sudden, like, something comes up in your life and it's just not something you can fit in anymore, that's within your right too, to, call a meeting, revise the plan, and, make it fit your life a little bit better if necessary, like if maybe less services, or, putting services on pause. All of that is, are completely, appropriate options. And then I was just going to go back to what Ashley was talking about with what does this look like? One of the things that, we try to really be focused upon is your routines. So,
Right.
like, what challenges are you experiencing during bath time or during meal time, and, and being present for some of those routines. We might not always be there at bath time at 7 p.m., but maybe we can recreate it, or maybe we can help you brainstorm ideas around that, because those are the times of day that your child is naturally learning all of the time. And if you can implement some of the ideas that you work on together during your coaching sessions, then you can build them into those things that you're doing. Then you don't have to create this extra time to practice working on those things.
Right, Karen. And I think that's a good point. And I think I started it and then I lost my train of thought, but I think that's excellent that's excellent to think about it in a way of, again, we can be there for a week, but if you're implementing those strategies every night at bath time, that's how many hours of therapy is your child getting. So that's, yes.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Okay, so you have rights in birth to 3, and as your child grows and they enter school, you also realize, or will help you learn, that your child also has rights in the school districts as well. But your rights are important, and it's important to know what your rights are, because if you don't, then you can't kind of advocate for yourself if you're having a problem with whatever might come up. So one of Birth to 3's goals is to help parents become, like Ashley said earlier, kind of empowered to be their child's advocate, to be the one there to know what should I expect. So in birth to 3, again, the rights are on the website as well, and you'll always receive, or at least be offered, a copy of your rights every time you meet. So you'll, at that initial evaluation, you'll get a copy of your parent rights. At that first meeting, if you do your IFSP, you'll be offered another copy of your parent rights, and so on. So we joke a lot of times that parents, if they accept them every time, they could like wallpaper their house with them. But one of the rights that you have always is to have written notice that that an evaluation or a meeting is going to take place. It's called prior written notice, and you'll get basically a little piece of paper that says we're planning on doing evaluation XYZ with your child on this day at this time, so that we're not just showing up at your door and saying, "Hi, surprise! We're going to evaluate your child now." So you have the time to plan for those things. You also have to give us consent to do any kind of evaluation with your child. So we need to ask you to sign consent to do that. And also, in order to share any information with any outside agency, we have to ask for your consent. At the initial evaluation, we will ask you if it's okay to share the results of the evaluation with your pediatrician, because they are kind of an integral partnership with us. We want to make sure that your pediatrician is aware of the fact that that your child is eligible for services and, what our plan is. But of course, if you didn't want that information shared, that is within your right to refuse to provide consent. As we mentioned earlier, you have the right to a choice of programs. So if you are not happy with the program, either that you've been assigned or that you are originally, choosing, you have that right to what's called dispute resolution. And as we talked about earlier, there are steps in that process, and the best steps are to start with your program to discuss those things so that they're aware of that and that they can, help try to make a better fit for you. However, if you're not happy with, the services that you're being provided with, from a program standpoint, you have the right to request or transfer to another program that provides services within your area. So you have the right to confidentiality. As I said before, we have to, if we're going to share anything, we need your permission to do so. And that's even, permission to talk to the daycare. We need to know that you're okay with us, making the daycare part of that team and sharing information with the daycare. You have the right to IFSP development, and kind of along the lines of that is you also have the right to the evaluation process as well. Those parts of birth to 3 are within your rights. They are required. They're required free to you of no charge. Currently in the state of Connecticut, because of the pandemic, there is no cost share. There has been no cost to any families since the pandemic started, and we're not really aware of when and if that may return. But to kind of touch on the question that was asked previously, there was and may be again a fee, which is depending on your family size and your income. There is, or what used to be, a family fee associated with services. That part of things is kind of still up in the air, but as of now, there is no charge for anyone for services or any of the other stuff, the IFSP meetings or the evaluations. Go ahead, Ashley.
I was just going to pop up back to confidentiality. I have some families that have worried about this. We know that families may love us dearly and we might have a great relationship, but they also don't really want to acknowledge us if they see us in public. Some of us work in really, really small towns, and not everybody wants to have to explain who that woman they just spoke to at the grocery store is. So we don't approach parents unless we don't approach parents. If they come to us first, wonderful. But that confidentiality piece, we really do, we take it seriously.
And then the final one I have written here is just that you have the right to review or amend any written document. So if your therapist is going over the evaluation from, the report from the initial evaluation, and there's something in there that you think is just completely inaccurate, like this is not a good picture of my child, I never said that they did this, you can bring that up. You can say, I don't really agree with that, because again, you're a team, a member of this team, and it's important that your opinion is reflected in those reports. So you have the right to, bring that up if you have any concerns.
If you trust play, you will not have to control your child's development as much. Play will raise the child in ways you can never imagine. I think we really just wanted to end on that as a reminder that when we say play is the work of children, it really is true. We know that there are a lot of concerns about colors, letters, numbers, shapes, but really play is where it's at. That's the most important thing, and the most important opportunities you can give your children is the opportunity to play.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much the end of our presentation. But if you have, if there are any additional questions, we are happy to answer questions or further talk about things that, maybe you wanted more detail about. We also, I don't know, Adriana, if this can be shared as a document with families, but the next page does have some of the resources that we mentioned as well.
Yes, absolutely. We can definitely share them with the families. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or drop a line in the chat. I think I do have a question. I have two questions briefly. So the first one is, what does a percentile rank tells us about a child's development? And do birth to 3 reports include percentile ranks?
Our birth to 3 reports do not usually include the percentile rank. We usually arrive at that score, but it's not something that we typically bring into the actual report, because our standards basically for eligibility solely rely on that standard deviation score. In terms of percentile rank, Ashley, do you have any good insight on that one? I am not as overly familiar with that.
No, and I would say if a parent, your child's percentile rank is strictly used by specific agencies, whether it's some agencies in birth to 3 or, as they get older, school districts. It's a way to plot them on a chart, really. I think that parents oftentimes have concerns or confusion around them. I would encourage parents not to really worry too much about that. We really use the standard deviation, and maybe some agencies also look at the percentile rank, just to give us that quick snapshot picture of where they are right then on that day, and ways that we can maybe support that child and that family.
Excellent.
I'm not really a big standardized score person.
We understand what we need to know, which is, and I think Ashley's point is important, is that part of that percentile rank is it is a plot number. It's if you were to, and it's related to the standard deviation for sure, but it's not one that birth to 3 is very concerned about, but as children develop along, kind of through the school years and stuff like that, oftentimes you will see percentile ranks in reports and testing measures and stuff like that. But it's definitely not one that we utilize readily in birth to 3.
Definitely. Thank you, ladies. And the last question is regarding re-evaluation process in birth to 3. So how often does birth to 3 re-evaluate, and is it a similar evaluation like the initial? Is it a multidisciplinary eval?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It will be basically the same, except you can have the same program come back out to do that evaluation. A lot of families do choose to do that because that program already has, like, you know, some history and some of the background knowledge for that child. But it may be two different evaluators. Oftentimes, I mean, you have the right to reevaluate as often as you want. It used to be like you had to wait 3 months, but I believe now you can reevaluate as often as you want. But we usually as evaluators recommend that you do wait some time to allow some time for your child to change. One of the big ones that I usually, if it's a speech concern, if your child is just under 2 at the initial evaluation, oftentimes the bar for qualification raises pretty significantly after the child turns 2. So often we'll say, okay, your child's, you know, 19 months right now or 20 months, you know, give us a call back when the child turns 2, because their language development may look a lot different at that point in that standardized measure that we use.
And that's a good
Another
point,
thing
Karen.
I'm sorry. Another thing just to mention that I meant to mention earlier is that the scores for communication are a combined score. So if you're only concerned about your child's expressive language and they understand everything you say, so they have a really high score in their receptive language, but their expressive language is down here, the combined score kind of, you know, evens them out just a little bit. And so sometimes parents are like, well, what do you mean? Why isn't my, you know, they're not talking. Why didn't my child qualify? So that's an example sometimes where if a speech therapist does have a concern around language or around that expressive language, they might pull out another measure or another testing measure to look at that expressive language a little bit more specifically so that they can kind of tease out what the actual problem is. I'm sorry, Ashley, go ahead. I didn't know if you had
No, I don't remember what I was going to say.
Okay.
Thank you so much, ladies, Ashley, Karen, for joining us tonight. This was very informative. Ruby dropped a line in the chat, says thank you. That was very informative. And Vanessa, do we have any other comments?
No, on Facebook, no, it's just those 2 questions that you asked, but no more questions.
All right. So with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much. And if anyone has questions regarding evaluations, feel free to call CPAC 860-739-3089.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.